When it opened at Milwaukee's Mitchell International Airport, it was the first aviation museum to be located inside an airport terminal. We'll highlight the Mitchell Gallery of Flight with Bill Streicher and Chuck Boie. They're my special guests next on I Remember. Hi, I'm Jim Peck. Welcome to I Remember. Joining me tonight are Bill Streicher and Chuck Boie, both aviation enthusiasts. Bill is the board president and Chuck is a board member of the Mitchell Gallery of Flight. This museum features some pioneer Wisconsin aviators. Take a look.
In 1919, Alfred Lawson built an airliner in Milwaukee in his effort to create the first passenger airline. A scale model of the Lawson airliner is on exhibit at the Mitchell Gallery of Flight. This aviation museum opened in the late 1980s at Mitchell International Airport in Milwaukee. Historian George Hardy Jr. was part of a group of aviation enthusiasts who founded the museum. Ed Green, the former art director at the Milwaukee Public Museum, helped out with the design. Chuck Boie was a professional artist when he joined the Friends of the Mitchell Gallery of Flight. He contributed his talent to some of the exhibits, including the replica of the 1940 Layton Avenue terminal. The airport and museum are named for General Billy Mitchell, considered by many to be the father of the U.S. Air Force. Charles Lindbergh visited the Milwaukee airport in 1927 after his famous transatlantic flight. His visit is on display, and a model of the Spirit of St. Louis hangs outside the gallery. A number of Wisconsin aviators are honored with exhibits. These hometown heroes include the World War II Ace of Aces and a Vietnam pilot who was awarded the Medal of Honor. Apollo astronaut James Lovell is also highlighted. Another exhibit features a Milwaukee connection to an experiment aboard a space shuttle. Other models on display include military aircraft and airliners from the 1940s to the 1970s. A 22-foot airship model is suspended from the ceiling. The size of the Graf Zeppelin II becomes apparent when mounted next to a 757 airplane of the same scale. A non-profit museum with no admission fee and open during normal airport hours, the Mitchell Gallery of Flight is located in the main terminal near Concourse C.
I was surprised to learn, getting ready for the show, that Mitchell Field was not the first airport around here. What was Butler Field?
I could take that one. Butler Field actually was called New Butler Field or Curry Park Airport. It was technically called Milwaukee County Airport. It was the first airfield that was sponsored by the state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee, and it was established, I think, around 1926.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there much call for an airport in 1926?
There wasn't really that much. Actually, 1919 is, I think, the correct date. That's when Alfred Lawson came up with the idea of an airliner and a nationwide airline system.
Wow. It's
pretty remarkable for that time. It was eventually unsuccessful, but the location was Curry Park, and that's where he did a lot of flight testing. And it wasn't, I think it was in the mid-20s that the airport actually, where it is located now, was acquired by Milwaukee County and gradually expanded.
Butler, if I'm correct, didn't they do airmail out of Butler Field?
I don't know if they did.
I think there was one of the first, what do they call that, a CAM airmail route that went through Butler, if I recall correctly.
It could have. I think Northwest Airways, which began serving Milwaukee in 1926, carried a lot of airmail.
That the same one that we still deal with, Northwest?
Well, yeah, they were just absorbed by Delta.
Okay.
But, yeah, that was the original.
Wow.
That was the first carrier at Mitchell Field.
Now, why did Butler close? What was the problem?
It wasn't very big.
Right.
And I think that, air transportation, even though it was in its infancy at that point, expanded quite rapidly, so they needed more space, and that's really what eventually ended up with Mitchell Field.
So how did How did we get Mitchell Field? Somebody must have owned the land.
Well, I think that the land at one time was farmland, like much of the area. It was acquired from a local farmer by, I believe it was a Hamilton.
That's correct. Yep.
Hamilton was a propeller and an airplane manufacturer.
Really?
He designed and constructed something called the Hamilton metal plane.
I've heard of that metal plane.
Right. It's
because other things were made out of wood at the time?
This is one of the early airliners. In fact, there's a replica, a model of one of the Hamilton metal planes in Northwest Airlines colors in our museum.
And was he successful with this?
Yes.
Very, yes.
He was.
He sold probably just under a dozen of them to Northwest Airlines for their scheduled transportation routes. And they were built in Milwaukee for a while, and ultimately I think he sold the company, or the company did move to Wichita, Kansas.
That's correct, yeah. He had actually, I think, worked for a company called Matthews Brothers, which was a woodworking firm, and then Matthews also made propellers. And then he, I think, managed the shop, the propeller shop for Matthews Brothers, and ended up starting his own company.
And that was hugely successful.
It was. And as a matter of fact, if you turn the clock all the way up to the present time, Hamilton Standard, of course, was one of the #1 propeller builders in the world. And Hamilton Sunstrand is still involved with, I believe they're a division of United Technologies, and they still are very active in aviation and aerospace.
I think they're down in Rockford, are they not?
They're all over. I think out east too, in Connecticut, and they have plants all over. But Thomas Hamilton.
Do you know why he left this area, by the way?
I believe the city fathers weren't exactly supportive of his efforts, and
it's hard to believe that the city fathers in Milwaukee would not be far long-range looking.
I don't want to make political statements, but
probably
okay, I will.
I think he wasn't encouraged by the business climate, and he also, of course, you got to realize that what was then called Hamilton Field, he sold. It was, I think, only 56 acres at that point, and then Milwaukee County, which was looking to expand an airport, purchased the land from Hamilton, renamed it Milwaukee County Airport, and I think purchased probably another 100 acres or so.
When did what we know now as Mitchell Field become Mitchell Field? It was Hamilton Field. It was Milwaukee County Airport.
Right.
What other mutations did it go through before it became Mitchell?
Well, it became Mitchell right around, I believe, 1940.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite a jump.
Right. And it evolved through several names up to the point where it is right now, General Mitchell International Airport. But I had looked into some of this early on in some research work that I was doing on World War II at Mitchell Field. And Milwaukee County Airport became Mitchell Field, General Mitchell Field. And during the war, the Army Air Force took over and did flight training for the Air Transport Command and the Ferrying Command at Mitchell. And at that point, originally, as was the convention for military airfields, they named the airport after a nearby local community. So officially, it was Cudahy Field.
Oh, really?
Or Cudahy Army Airfield. That lasted only a very short time. People were very protective of the Mitchell name, and so there was a compromise worked out where the Army Air Force named it Billy Mitchell Field.
Okay.
At least for the duration of the war, and then after the war in 1948, when it was reacquired by the county, it reverted to General Mitchell Field.
Who was Billy Mitchell? Let's talk about him a little bit.
Oh, terrific.
That
patriot.
could be a program in and of itself.
And we've done one, but I want to just kind of refresh people's memories, including my own.
Born into the richest family in the state of Wisconsin at the time. His grandfather started the Northwestern National Life Insurance Company, Milwaukee Road Railroad, Marine National Bank.
A couple of things like that.
And he was also a U.S. congressman.
And that was Alexander Mitchell.
That's
his
Alexander
grandfather.
Mitchell.
Then his father was a congressman too, wasn't he?
He was a congressman early on, and then a U.S. senator. And that is a key point, I think, because Billy Mitchell, who grew up in basically West Dallas, 53rd and Lincoln, which is the family home called Meadowmere.
So he didn't live at what is now the Wisconsin Club,
No,
which
that
was Alexander Mitchell's
that was
home.
Alexander's home. But Billy could have very easily lived a life of luxury and wealth and power.
Yes, he
But
was
when
born
the
to it.
Spanish-American War broke out, he joined the Army as a private.
As a private?
He rose very quickly through the ranks, second lieutenant, first lieutenant. In 1903, he became the youngest captain in the Army.
Really?
And learned to fly at his own expense, was a real visionary. And I think when you think of Billy Mitchell, you think of intelligence, perseverance, and courage. You know, he distinguished himself in World War I as a hero, commanded the largest air force. There wasn't such a thing as an air force at the time.
It was the Army Air Force.
It was, yeah, the Americans, the British, and the French in World War I came back to this country as a hero and really saw the need for air power and fought very hard for it.
Fought so hard that he alienated a lot of his superiors and ended up being court-martialed.
He did.
Right.
The court-martial was basically for insubordination or bad behavior. And he actually welcomed that because it increased the notoriety or the platform that he sought in expounding on his views. But I think, you know, the vision that he had for air power was really proven at the end of World War II, because all of the predictions he made came true, or
Well, didn't
most
he
of them.
predict at one point to someone Pearl Harbor?
Yes, he did. And that was in the 20s. He had undertaken several missions to Japan, Germany, other places throughout the world, and saw what they were doing in aviation, and he foresaw the need for it here. So he did in fact predict the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Not the exact date, but
But he did say that Pearl would be, he felt it would be invaded, and somebody asked him by whom, and he said,
the Japanese.
probably the Japanese.
Right, yeah.
Amazing.
But the thing is, for me, you know, he died in 1936 at age 56.
Yeah, pretty young guy.
And he was a kind of a broken, defeated man, still very gallant, but, you know, and then 10 years later, in 1946, the country realizes after World War II what a great man he was and that how accurate he was in his predictions, and they gave him the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Isn't that amazing?
So I think that, you know, having our airport and our museum named after Billy Mitchell, I think, is a wonderful thing because it does tell his story, which is a very courageous and honorable one.
Let's talk about the museum a little bit, the Gallery of Flight. When did it start?
Well, the gallery, the Friends of the Mitchell Gallery, is an organization that was formed to support the museum itself, and it came into being around 1985. It really was the idea of a gentleman by the name of George Hardy Jr.
George has been on this show.
Yes,
and
we're
great fans of his.
Oh, we all are.
Yeah, George is probably the main reason why both Chuck and myself are involved with the Friends of the Mitchell Gallery right now. But it was his idea to begin with to establish this organization. And he worked very closely with the airport administration, Barry Bateman at the time, who came into Milwaukee in the early 1980s. And I believe one of the very first things that happened was he had a meeting with George Hardy, and George lobbied to have some space set aside in the Milwaukee terminal building.
And that's unusual, isn't it, in itself, that the gallery
It was, in particular, at the time, it was unusual. George was thinking ahead. I think prior to that, there were a few minor exhibits in the Milwaukee airport about Mitchell. But George had this concept in mind for a much larger museum. And Barry Bateman supported him in that, and some space was set aside in the redesign of the terminal when it was renovated in the 1980s. And
how'd you get, by the way, how'd you get the government to give you tax money for this?
We didn't.
We didn't.
We
Really?
didn't. It's all volunteer.
It is.
Yep.
It is. The museum was constructed with funds that were raised through, I believe we had a little air event, fundraising. All of this was done internally. Ultimately, we opened in the latter part of 1987. And the Friends organization itself was holding meetings prior to that time, and so we were very active up until that point. But once the museum opened, notoriety kind of ballooned a bit, and we got more exhibits to come into the museum. We not only have a museum with exhibits, but we also tried to get some educational information out to the public.
Well, I was going to ask you, who is your target audience?
anybody that is interested in aviation and the public in general, I guess.
Right.
So kids,
yeah, I mean,
grown-ups,
our
people like
museum,
me?
our museum's only 1,500 square feet, so we're rather small.
Mm-hmm.
But we get, on the average, between 250 and 300,000 visitors a year.
Wow.
Now that's because we are where we are
Well, sure.
in the airport.
But that's great.
But it's free admission, and I think Barry Bateman himself, the airport director, is somewhat of a visionary because he was looking to extend cultural and entertainment resources to the community. And I think in this day and age, especially with the county budget problems, our space could probably very easily be used as retail store
Sure,
or
a store,
restaurant.
yeah,
But
mall
it's
shop.
quality of life, and I think we're proud of the fact that we offer that to the public. The reaction has been very good. Even though we are small, we have it packed with a lot of very interesting exhibits.
Talk a little bit about the exhibits. You honor some very significant people. One of them is Lester Maitland. Who was Lester Maitland?
Well, Lester Maitland was a pilot, air service pilot from Milwaukee, and he was a speed flyer. He did he flew some endurance and speed races in the 1920s. But he was probably most famous for a long-distance flight that he made from California to Hawaii nonstop.
Wow.
He
1927.
right.
Too.
Really?
Same year as Lindbergh.
Yeah. Well, guess who got the press, folks?
In fact, after those
it's a lot
flights-
easier to find a continent than it is the islands of Hawaii.
I think
Absolutely, it's
so.
a navigational achievement to find that little bit, and it's a very long, obviously, over water stretch. There's no land to divert to, so you had to have an airplane that worked, obviously, and you had to have navigation that was precise.
Yeah, to know where you were going.
Absolutely. He flew with a gentleman, another Air Corps pilot or Air Corps member by the name of Albert Hegenberger, I believe the name was.
He was the navigator,
He was the navigator.
on the Hawaii flight.
So it was the two of them.
Yes,
Right.
Now,
but
wasn't
it was a
there
large airplane too. It was a Fokker trimotor. It was an airplane about the size of like a Ford trimotor, quite big as opposed to what Lindbergh had. But
Wasn't there an airport named after Maitland?
yes. Yep.
Maitland Airport was an airstrip that was located right at the Milwaukee lakefront. In fact, it's the site of the current Summerfest grounds,
Sure.
Meyer Park.
And wasn't there, didn't it, among other things, didn't they have seaplane?
Yes,
Right.
it was actually there was an airport called the Seadrome, in addition to Maitland Field. But since they were both together, most people just referred to it as Maitland Field, and it was named in Maitland's honor when he returned triumphantly from his Hawaiian flight. But it was never utilized, I don't think, as much as the city fathers thought it might be as a business airport like Meigs Field in Chicago. And during the Cold War, it actually was turned into a Nike missile site. And then when that shut down, like Bill said, it became Summerfest when that was developed.
I've heard rumors that there underneath Summerfest there might still be Nike bunkers.
Well, that may be. I don't know that for a fact, but there were underground storage bunkers for the missiles at one time, and they may have been simply paved over, or they may have been filled in. I believe one of the Summerfest offices was located in one of the old Army barracks buildings that was from the Nike site.
Yep,
How cool would
is
that be?
correct,
In fact, this city was ringed by some Nike bases.
Yeah, it's a
wasn't it?
very interesting Cold War story. Milwaukee and Chicago were deemed to be a very critical industrial area that required protection by not only short-range missiles, the Nikes, but also fighter interceptor aircraft. And Milwaukee was ringed by, I believe it was 8 missile sites, anti-aircraft missile sites. Maitland Field was one of them. There was another one out by the county grounds on the southwest side of the city. Lannon, Waukesha. In fact, there's the remnants of the Nike site out in Waukesha.
Really?
Hillcrest Park.
Oh.
You can see parts of the old radar structure
How
still
cool.
there.
Wasn't, I never know when I'm hallucinating and when I'm really remembering something, but wasn't there something during the Cuban Missile Crisis that we had planes circling around Milwaukee that were loaded? In a nice way, I mean.
Yes, in a way, yes. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy directed the Strategic Air Command to disperse the bomber force. And one of the pre-planned scenarios was to take some of the bombers and locate them at civilian airports. And Milwaukee was one of those dispersal sites for the bombers. And in fact, for a period of about 2 weeks during the height of the crisis, there were 4 B-47 bombers here from Lincoln Air Force Base down in Nebraska. Wow. And the aircraft were here loaded, obviously, with nuclear weapons.
Wow. Somebody else who's recognized at the Gallery of Flight is Major Richard Bong. Now, I remember a little about him, but he's a fascinating story.
Yeah, he was from Poplar, Wisconsin, and he was the P-38 Lightning is an aircraft he flew predominantly in World War II, and he was he's still regarded as the ace of aces with the best fighter pilot record of World War II, and we have an exhibit on Richard Bong.
How many planes is he credited with shooting down?
40.
40, and these were confirmed kills.
air-to-air kills.
Wow.
And he died tragically shortly after World War II as a test pilot.
He of all the things.
Yeah, he was returned. General Kenny, who was the commander of the 5th Air Force, figured that it was enough pressing the luck of Richard Bong in combat, and he brought him back to the United States, and he became a test pilot. And he was testing one of the very first jet aircraft here in the United States, the Lockheed P-80. And unfortunately, there was a problem on takeoff out in Burbank, California, and he crashed and was killed.
We have the Bong recreational area that's obviously named after him. But wasn't that supposed to be an airfield also?
Yes.
Right. That was the Air Force was scheduled to move into Bong Air Force Base. In fact, construction was underway when it was decided that the base was no longer needed. And it was terminated, but they did get the foundation of a 2-mile-long runway. In fact, as you fly over the area, even to this day, you can see that runway.
Yeah. Who was Lance Sijan? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Lance Sijan.
Sijan.
Sijan was a Milwaukee native. He graduated from Bayview High School, and he attended the Air Force Academy, graduated in 1965, and went on to become an Air Force fighter pilot. And this was during the Vietnam War. He was sent to Vietnam and was based at a location called Da Nang. And on his, I believe it was his 52nd mission, he was lost. The aircraft in which he was flying with another pilot was damaged. The bombs, the investigation indicated that he wasn't shot down, but the bombs that they were dropping detonated underneath the aircraft prematurely. The pilot that he was with did not make it out, but Lance Sijan parachuted. He landed in enemy territory, and he evaded capture for, I believe it was about 45 days.
Wow. And seriously injured.
And he was seriously injured. He had a broken leg and other serious injuries. He was finally captured, I believe it was Christmas Day in 1968. And even though captured and seriously injured, he tried to escape, and in fact he did escape from his captors and was recaptured. He was put into the infamous Hanoi Hilton prison, and he died then in, I believe, January of '68.
Having been tortured, beaten, never gave in.
Never gave
broke
in.
His spirit.
He was very true to the code of honor that he learned as a serviceman, and he stands out as being an example to other servicemen to this day.
And he was given the Medal of Honor also.
He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor by President Gerald Ford in 1976. And there are a number of honors that were bestowed upon him, one of which is at his alma mater, the Air Force Academy. One of the dormitories is named after him.
Really? Of course, we talk about James Lovell, the astronaut. We forget about James Lovell, the aviator.
Well, James Lovell is actually an honorary board member of the Mitchell Gallery of Flight.
Really?
We're happy to say, and one of our most precious donors and benefactors. Recently, we just opened a special exhibit on his naval aviation and test pilot career. in addition to a large exhibit on his adventures as a NASA astronaut, most notably Apollo 13. Jim has worked very closely with Bill in developing that exhibit, and we have been the recipient of a whole range of different artifacts from Jim Lovell.
What's it like to work with a legend?
He's a terrific guy.
He's a very, absolutely, he's a very terrific individual. Very, I would say, down to earth. Very
no
supportive.
Pun intended.
Yeah, very, very good. He's been very supportive of the Mitchell Gallery of Flight. In fact, one of our very early contacts with him back in, I think it was in the mid-1990s, when we approached him about providing some artifacts for our museum. He was very, very agreeable to that, and he's been very generous with loaning a lot of things from both his naval aviator career and also his astronaut career, which we have on display.
Yeah, you've got to. Is this book still for sale, by the way, at the gallery?
It is.
Yes, it is.
You got to update this, though. This is a fabulous book. It's General Mitchell International Airport: A Record of Progress. And if you go down to the Gallery of Flight, you can see it, you can buy it, you can see all these exhibits and lots more that we didn't get a chance to talk about. But Bill and Chuck, thank you very much for being with us. This is fascinating. Thank you. It's always fascinating to see you. Hope we'll see you next time as we continue to remember. Bill.